Welcome to the Providence College podcast. My name is Joe Carr. We are pleased to present a recording of a most interesting campus lecture presented by Lenny Alsfeld from the class of 1974. Mr. Alsfeld, who lives in Louisiana, is a loyal and engaged alum who goes out of his way to help PC and its students whenever he can. He is also a successful business executive and a man of deep faith. He combined those attributes to develop this talk, Being St. Joseph Today, Father and Worker, a personal reflection on St. Joseph's virtues in the business world. The presentation, sponsored by Campus Ministry and the Knights of Columbus, took place on April 12th in Aquinas Lounge.
You know, I have great respect for this institution. In 1970, when I walked in to the front of this campus, I realized that this was going to be a life-changing situation for me. In many ways. Richie Kless, who's also here, was a classmate of mine from New York, and we encompassed the last all-male class of this great institution. When we first were introduced to Providence, we were put into these little beanies, and you had to go to Hawkins Hall, and there's a fabulous human being named Walter Heath. And Walter Heath made a presentation of which two things stood out, and they're still with me to this day. He talked for about 20 minutes, and he said, your time here will be the single greatest experience of your life, or somewhat worthless 4 years. And the difference between those 2 points will be how actively you engage in the community on this campus. Well, that hit me like a bolt. Because we all know when we walked in as freshmen, we're extremely intimidated by something that seemed like we weren't really ready for it. In my case, I came here almost by accident. I played hockey, but in those high school days, sometimes the books didn't get enough attention. And we were in the middle of Vietnam War, and we had back then a lottery. One of the few times I won a lottery with a low number meant that they were going to pretty much certify that I would get drafted if I couldn't get a college to firm it. And every college I applied to rejected me, even the ones that recruited me to play hockey. They weren't wrong. I had not prepared for what I knew I should have done when it was pretty much too late. I met a gentleman on this campus named Lou Lamorello. The Big East Hockey Trophy is named after him. The National Hockey League has enshrined him in their Hall of Fame. The USA Hockey Organization has enshrined him in the Hockey Hall of Fame. That man went over to the admissions office and said, give this kid a shot. That was a big, big test of both my ability to respond and Lou's commitment, not because I could play hockey, but because he saw something in me from watching me grow up in Cranston that made him believe I would fit in well on this campus. In our lives, we're blessed and lucky if we get to meet people who can be role models for us. And the one thing that God provided me was an instruction, an opportunity, starting with my parents, on things that I can learn about myself and things that I can contribute. My mother used to say, Lenny, before you can say I love you, you got to start with I. And it seems kind of like a kitchen philosophy. But if the beginning of your life, the beginning of your day, you don't know what the purpose of that day is, then you're probably going to have an average or below average day. I used to see my father. I was the third of 6 children, growing up in Cranston, Rhode Island. 2 older sisters, 2 younger sisters, and a younger brother. The one permanent thing I remember seeing every night when we lived in a small 4-room apartment with 6 children, 2 parents and a couple of dogs, was my father was by the side of the bed every night saying his prayers. And my mother was on the other side of the bed saying her prayers. We never had a meal where we didn't say grace before that meal. Now, I don't want you to think my childhood was this fabulous, perfect, and controlled, focused life. It was anything but that. I was in St. Paul's School to the 6th grade, and even those nuns said, this kid's ungovernable, we need to get him out. So I had the privilege of being kicked out of St. Paul's School, where my aunt was a nun in the same order, the Immaculate Heart of Mary. I even got to spend an entire semester, when school ended, joining the nuns back at the convent for about 30 minutes of developmental exercises. There was a time in the Immaculate Heart Order, Mary Order, where they changed their habits. And this cross used to be around the neck of my Aunt Betty, Sister Mercille. There were 24 nephews and nieces of various levels of risk within her family, my mother, her sisters, and her brother. And when Sister Mercille was looking around to figure out who's the greatest risk, I won that in a landslide. When she gave me this, she said, Lenny, put it under your pillow, and every night ask Jesus to make you good. If you look at this closely, there's not much left of Jesus' face, and the body's worn down pretty much. When I came to Providence College, this was under my pillow every day, every night, all 4 years. This was under my pillow today when I go home to sleep and for the rest of my life. All my children have adopted that. They understand the importance of the cross. One of the most perfect things about this college is that almost everywhere you look is a reminder of Christ. It's a reminder of the opportunity to be a part of this community and to put your priorities straight. When my children were young, I said, these are my priorities. I serve first the Lord, second your mother, and the rest of you four can fight over what order you're going to be after that. I'll tell you, the girls were a little more aggressive in that order. In looking at the role of Mary's husband and in Joseph's acceptance of that role, he really was the very first man to share in the faith with the Mother of God. Joseph was called by God to serve and to be the person of the mission that Jesus directly learned from. There's an experience called fatherhood that started at that very early point. There was a case when Jesus was a young child. Herod, understanding that Jesus might be the Messiah, sent out to destroy or to find and to kill Jesus. And the angels appeared to Joseph and said, you must move to Egypt. Now, I don't know if I have the flexibility when I'm trying to raise a family that's 3 or 4 years old to pick up and move to Egypt, particularly because there were no mode of transportation, and I'm sure the terrain and the opportunity to be disrupted in that travel was great. And after Herod died, the angels came back and allowed the retracement of Jesus into a normal life in Jerusalem. But what I do know is that in my lifetime, we've seen people that were very formative early. In the 60s, that was a time when there were constant age differentials. And as Richie Kless will tell you, one of the common quotes of people that were in college was, don't trust anybody over 30. We had the Vietnam War. We had race problems. We had a situation where the entire fabric of what we knew in this country was being challenged. And in a similar way, we had an opportunity to recognize people like Martin Luther King, who came out in an incredibly difficult time in America's history and did the things that today have created an environment much more caring. When I look at what happened when I first came on this campus, I was in what was then called the New Dorm. It's now called McVinney. I was in room 401. And the men that I met on that floor are permanent parts of my life today. There used to be a church right behind that wall. And there was a regular Sunday Mass at 7 o'clock. Never wanted to miss it. I knew I had so many hours during the week where everything else owned me. But I wanted that 1 hour. It's a practice that I've never failed to fulfill, and it's one that my children do. Often I find people that say, well, they don't want to go to church. It doesn't stimulate them. It's not exciting enough. It's not emotional enough. When you look at the course of your life and the hours you spend, that 1 hour, to me, means everything. When I travel, I always want to go to the oldest church. I love sitting in that old church with those beautiful stained glass windows. And I try to imagine the passion and the depth of faith that those people, that generation, 100, 200 years old, felt about demonstrating the love of Christ and their strong Catholic beliefs. I also love seeing the names etched under the windows of the contributors that wanted some type of a legacy to permanently connect them to that experience. And I try to imagine why, when I look around that church, they all look my age and not enough young people. And so what I try to do is, when I'm spending my time coaching, being involved in the community, is talk about the selfish and perfect opportunity to take 1 hour of your life to sit in the quiet, beautiful 50, 100, 200-year churches and think about all of the energy, the emphasis, and the activities that have existed there throughout that time. I'm not looking for entertainment. I know the rhythm of the Mass. The beautiful thing about this faith is if you go to Georgia, Perth Amboy, or San Francisco, it's always the same structure. And the community always feels the same to me. You know, Father talked about some of my involvement in certain of the communities that I've been involved with. We've all had tragedy in our life. When I was promoted to go down to New Orleans, about a week after that happened, my sister's only son and the only grandson in my family, my godson, was diagnosed with leukemia. He was 4 years old. That's the worst word you can imagine. And we had no idea how we were going to deal with this. God called him when he was 6 years old in June. But a month before he died, there were two people in Warwick, Rhode Island, that had never raised money before and came up with an idea to find a child with a limited life prognosis and send that child on a wish that they wanted. They weren't business people. They were a husband and wife. And it's called A Wish Come True. It's still in business today. When Jason died, I made a pledge to my Lord that I would pay it forward. And I was in New Orleans about 6 months when I heard somebody on a radio talk about doing a wish program. I pulled back in, found a contact, and visited with them. There are two remaining members on that original board, myself and Dr. Kirk Bellard, who later became my kid's pediatrician. When I get back to New Orleans on Saturday night, I have an appointment at 6 o'clock in a little girl's life who's 7 years old. She has one of the most horrible diagnoses that I've ever read. She has a disease that's only been found in 3 people in 40 years. I can tell you, when you get into those situations, you sit and think about what it is, how you're going to handle it, and how terrible it makes you feel. That's a normal, personal, selfish reaction. On the other hand, I feel a great joy of having that person being introduced to me through a system of social workers at the Children's Hospital that trust us and our guidance to take something that's horrible and make something that's joyous. We've done it over 1,400 times. And we've had every kind of a wish, including one young boy who got to meet the Pope when he came to New Orleans. Now, I do believe in miracles. His name was Gerald Trosclair. He had incurable liver cancer. This was a boy whose wish was to meet the Pope. I thought I had some pretty good connections in the Archdiocese. I got married in 1983 by Bishop Stanley Ott. But when you're dealing with the Pope, all those contacts go out the window, and it's more difficult than getting a seat next to the president. I was allowed to put that young child and his family in the inner circle in front of the bishop's residence, where the Pope was going to end his day in the Pope-mobile, and he was going to be able to do a spiritual blessing not a personal meeting. I had enough simple common sense to have a Polish guy tell me how to write out, "Bless me, Father, for I am dying." And I put it on a big pink postcard. And it was drizzling, kind of like it is right now. And we had to get the 6 hours in that drizzling rain with a child with a very acute and very dangerous disease, waiting for the Pope to show up. And as I realized our position was now being dominated on the other side of that rotunda by a Polish Oompa band, dressed to the nines, my heart sank, because I don't know how I'm going to compete with about 80 people in a Polish costumes blaring instruments to get the Pope's attention. I stood in a chair when he came around. He picked up the Polish Oompa band first, and then he saw my pink sign. And as he came around, he stopped and he blessed the boy. I saw the entire family fall out on the ground. He went around and circled a second time and stopped there again and did it again. Right after I'd already gotten them off the floor, they went back down again. That young man is 29 years old. Not a single doctor can explain why that boy's alive today. He's a businessman, he works in a nuclear power plant, and he has children. I understand faith. I feel very fortunate that in the situations where we've seen difficulty, we've been able to realize that there's fabulous lessons to be learned. My mother used to say, before you put somebody in their place, put yourself in their place. This was a woman who didn't have a college degree, never had a checkbook, never drove a car. But she understood some of the simple issues of life. She understood that when you have children, if you hug them and kiss them and tell them you love them when the day starts, and you have a quiet little moment in a prayer, and you hug them and kiss them when you put them to bed at night, everything you do wrong between those 2 points is erased. And that opportunity has helped my oldest son, learning from the experiences that he's had in my nonprofits, go on to become a doctor, an oncologist, and he's working with cancer patients after he saw my brother lose his life to cancer. So there are plenty of opportunities when you graduate from this school. The first thing I would suggest is fail and fail forward as much as you can. When I first got in this business, it was 1978. I had no interest in being in this business. I gave up a great job selling Keebler cookies. And if I had one more person hit me with their basket and ask where the cookie aisle was, I was just going to lose it. My sophomore year, I was in Ma Hall, and there were 3 guys who lived next door to me. John Mazekin, a retired state trooper, Steve Massett, a CPA in Newport, Rhode Island, and Emilio Mazzola, a retired school teacher in Needham, Mass. John Mazekin was from New Jersey, and he had a friend named Jerry Kostick. And at the time I was here doing all the things that Father talked about, I also worked downtown at Philip Wolf Haberdasher. I knew every minute of my life where I was going to be, and I knew every dime it cost me to sit in a classroom. I had an opportunity on a Saturday, while others were having fun in the quad, for this kid, Mike Kostick, to walk in and see me selling clothes. And he remembered that, and he got in the brokerage business, and he started pestering me to become a broker. Well, realize the Dow Jones then was at 875. It hadn't been at 1,000 since the 60s. And my father questioned my brilliance by saying, "You're giving up a great job selling cookies to sell stocks and bonds? It's a crazy idea." Well, that was 40 years ago. The first 22 years of my life saw 5 straight firms go bankrupt, out of business. That's like getting divorced 5 times. You have no clients, no business, no phone numbers, no license. Now I have 2 choices. I can disguise it for my family, carry on as if life's great, and put one foot in front of the other and do the thing I need to do, as Joseph did for his family. He had plenty of reasons to believe that this might have been a crazy idea to wed Mary and to be able to have the type of life that he thought he was going to have as a carpenter. For 18 years after that, I started and ran my own firm, and then recently just sold it to Raymond James. I have no idea where this whole thing was going to take me. I know when you sit there as students, you kind of assume if you're with anybody who's as old as me, maybe we had a plan, maybe there was a pattern, maybe we had it all figured out. My freshman year, I was in business administration here. I was dumb as a brick in accounting, and I was horrible in statistics. Not a good place to be. And my GPA looked like it did in high school. Also not a good place to be. I had a great teacher, English teacher, who really got in my head. And I went to Dr. Renee Fortin and asked if he would sponsor me to be an English major. And he kind of laughed. A lot of athletes don't want to be English majors. And I did that for a year under his guidance. Going into my junior year, I realized, well, what if I can't make a living writing for the Cowell? I also yeah, I know. However, the other co-sports director of the Cowell went on to a full-time historic year as a writer for sporting magazines. We still are closed today. So my junior and senior year, I took 6 credits during the summer to get my education degree. And I did my student teaching, and I realized I didn't want to disappoint all those kids because they were all smarter than me in 7th grade. And I decided to pursue another direction. So it is almost by default. It's by the grace of God. It's by a divine intervention that I get to have a lifetime with people like Richie Kless in my life. I get to be a very lucky man to be married to one woman for 36 years with 4 healthy kids. I can tell you, my life began the day I walked on this campus. And I'm not overselling it. The opportunity to develop the holistic side of what you're doing exists in this campus. If you engage, if you take risks, if you stretch your boundaries into something that's uncomfortable, and if you trust in faith that you're going to be able to make it. One of the people I met along my life was an Irish priest, Seamus Doyle. Now, he left the priesthood. He's still a very devout Christian. And he sends me these spiritual writings every day. Clearly, he sees something I need in my life that maybe I misunderstood. And he sent me one the other day, ironically, 2 days before I was showing up here. That was Reinhold's Serenity Prayer. We all know how it begins. I want to share it with you because it makes a very tied-in point to what we're talking about. We all know it starts, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And most of us, we end it there. But it doesn't end there. He says, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, and taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is. Boy, we got plenty of evidence that around us today, don't we? Everywhere you look, they were putting missiles in Cuba when I was a kid, and they were telling you how to duck under the table when the bombs hit. Sounds a little like North Korea, doesn't it? Maybe not. It said, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that God will make all things right if I surrender to his will. That's not easy to do. Joseph did it. That I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Now, Seamus never leaves it at that. He then expands upon it by telling me the things that I should be picking up from this. He says, many individuals recite or pray the Serenity Prayer either do not know the complete prayer, or they stop at the words, and wisdom to know the difference. And that's me. I'm guilty of that. Yet it's the remainder of the prayer that helps us live our life of prayer in its totality. In it, we are invited to enjoy one moment at a time. That's not easy to do when you're in college. You got all kinds of things going on in your life. You're juggling balls and you're trying to recognize what's the most important at that moment. The prayer was written at a time of hardship in the early 1930s. Reinhold understood hardships and he accepted them as a pathway to his peace. This can be difficult when we've lost everything and when we lose that which we deemed irreplaceable, like 5 jobs in 22 years. Taking this world as it is, not as I would have it. You know, that sounds like such an easy thing. But if you think about it, every time we're faced with something we don't like, we wished we could have gone back a day, a month, a week, a year, and changed it. Because that would have been the solution. We were so much wiser after it already happened. He says, how often do we become frustrated with life as it is? I was. I remember Saturdays sitting up there in my dorm thinking, everybody else, they seem to know where they're going. They got great families. The parents send them money. I got 5 hours of sleep and 8 things I got to do today. If only I, and you know that if only I has been a part of my life forever, and it was shocking he put it in his letter to me. Because I look at every situation, particularly those that are personally important to me, and I say, if only I would have ... When my brother was diagnosed with cancer, I was in Chicago. I flew in, wanted to give him a kidney, but they'd already operated on him. And I said, okay, if only I had known ... And the one thing cancer gave me with my brother George was 4 fabulous years to just fill that bucket with the dreams that we wanted. No regrets. God had a plan for him. I trust in that plan, and I know he's going to be the first one meeting me when my time is to go retreat. He says, we waste so much time in our attempts to change the reality around us. Yeah, we got a lot of that going on these days. Just turn on the TV. Accepting reality is the beginning point of our serenity. Accepting reality lets us know we're powerless over people. I mean, think about it. When we get married, we think we met the perfect person. We know statistically, half of them fail. We thought that was a control element. We stood there on the altar of God in front of her family and mine, and the one advice my mother gave me when that was my day was, you're there in front of the body of Christ, and if you always keep Christ between you and your wife, your marriage won't fail. Very, very bright. We call her the kitchen philosopher. It says, accepting reality lets us know we are powerless over people, places, and things, and there's a power greater than ourselves. Isn't that what we're talking about tonight? Trusting that he will make all things right. Trust is a difficult thing for those of us who have not experienced in their formative years, and despite not knowing what's going to happen to us, to continue to go forward. You get a lousy grade. You know, I don't remember what my GPA was. I'm sure it wasn't a 4.0. I'm probably sure it wasn't a 3.2. It may not have even been a 3.0. But what did it matter? Surrender is such a difficult word to say. It implies submission, capitulation. Of our spiritual journey, surrender is a high priority. And it really is. It's faith-based. There's no guarantees. You have to step forward with a firm belief that your guidance and your belief in the Lord is going to be there for you. We surrender our will to God. We use the gifts of discernment to discover God's will, and then we do it. Not my will, but your will to be done. The Creator God, Great Spirit, I give thanks to you for the prayers. May the Holy Spirit guide me to say of all things each day, so that I may continue to learn and surrender my will and live in a peace of mind. This guy's pretty good. Very good. And I have the unique privilege of having a lot of people like that in my life. I said earlier, I'm blessed with mentors. You know, had Father B not come down, with the Immersion Group. What a great opportunity I would have missed for this spectacular man. And I had Father Dom there a couple of years ago. I mean, I'm 2 for 2. Couldn't be any better than that. And I got involved in the Immersion Group because I was reading my alumni magazine and I saw pictures of these beautiful faces from Providence College in New Orleans. And I wasn't involved, nor did I even know they were coming. This is my town. We got the saints. And so I called the head of admissions and I tracked down the person who brought him down and I said, I'm just going to be very blunt. You may have guessed I have a little bit of problem with that. That can never happen again. You cannot come to New Orleans and have these kids sacrifice a week of their life in January, spend money to come down here, raise the money, and to commit to my city without me being engaged and be a part of their life. It's been fabulous. Sophie, who's sitting over there, is one of my New Orleans gals. You can wave at them. She's spectacular. And I'm going to embarrass her in a good way. I'm also an ambassador for Providence College for 26 years. Father Peterson is one of the most loving, fabulous human beings I've ever met in my life. And he called me up and he said, Lenny, we're going to do this ambassador thing. You got to go spend time and go around the high schools and tell children, young students, why they should come to Providence College. I said, well, how am I going to do that? He says, just tell them your story, most of which you couldn't repeat. So they started sending me statistics so I could sound like I knew how smart you were. Let me tell you what I know about the students sitting in front of me. You are the brightest, best prepared, most attractive, most desirable workers in America when you walk off this campus. Not hyperbole. That is what you are. I look at your SATs, I look at the number of people you attract, I look at your extracurriculars. We're lucky to have you. You've raised the bar so high that Richie and I always say we could never get into school again. It's true. I know I couldn't. Richie was smarter than me. I'm at a college night in New Orleans. It's the Archdiocese. It's like, maybe 120 colleges. Now, there are rules, and they make me sign a disclosure. I'm not going to break the rules, and you all know I do. Because if I put candy and stuff out, those kids are coming by my table. And if you get in front of the table, they can't go by without getting candy. You're not supposed to do that. So this is like club secret. We shut the thing down at 8 o'clock. Sophie's dad is this bigger-than-life doctor. Fabulous human being. He comes storming over to my table as we're ready to break it down. And he says, my daughter's got to go to Providence College. I said, you got it. Whatever you want. We're giving free scholarships. It's Dunkin' Donuts every day at her doorstep. And she's Italian. I said, nothing but Italian food as long as she wants. All part of the rules of recruiting, by the way. Maybe not. And I love her dad. Her sister was there, and I thought that was Sophie. So I started selling her. And he says, no, not that one. Her bigger sister, she's real smart. She's smart too, but the bigger sister's real smart. I went, oh, that's a dynamite comment. Everything I would ever hope representing the state of Louisiana is right there. That fabulous woman is a member of the Friars Club. She was an RA. And the greatest compliment of her commitment to her faith and what she wanted was when she chose where she wanted to go do junior year abroad. And they told her, we don't go there. You can't do that. And she dug in her heels. She said her prayer. She called her dad. Her dad tried to call in a favor, and I got nowhere. Nowhere. Stoned me at the gate. She stayed on it and stayed on it. And you know what? They understood the wisdom of that young lady, and they understood how committed she was to this program, and they gave in, and she went to go. She was allowed to go. Not only did it change her life, I hope it changed the administration that believed they could deny somebody what they wanted. I love that girl. I have another one coming here tomorrow that's going to be a freshman from Sacred Heart. If I could get the whole state of Louisiana to come here, I would be the luckiest guy in the world. You are fabulous, intelligent, highly, highly recruitable graduates when you walk off this campus. I promise you. But there's one thing you need to do to make that happen. I started with my mother's quote, I. And you should take that moment with a yellow pad and put I on the top of it. Quietly, by yourself, introduce yourself to who you are. The miracle is that when we're created, we have no control over that. And when we die, we have no control over that. And between that birth and 18, you really don't have a lot of control over that. Those decisions are made as your parents are renting you to turn you back loose into society. But your decision to come here was a brilliant one. And to capitalize on that in 4 years, you need to be able to identify why you individually are the most unique, perfect candidate for whatever job you do. It's simple. In every one of you, you have backgrounds and histories, likes, experiences, participation, extracurriculars. Put them down and learn about yourself. Because when you sit in front of a potential employer, they're going through a general screening with no deep, intense interest in you. They're just looking at your resume. But when you're in front of them, you put that fire light on. You help engage them in a discussion. You teach them why you're the person that job was created for. And you sell yourself. You'll be like the other 93% of last year's graduation class that are in a career they were trained for here or continuing their education. Providence grads are one of the highest placement grads in the country. And you have one of the highest retentions at 85% of all freshmen in 4 years. This group, I'm telling you, are sterling. And you need to know that. And you need to understand that, because that's your opportunity when you get out of here to convince somebody that you have the answers. The second part of that yellow pad is to list the things you want to do that make you happy. Every Friday, every Sunday before my head hits the pillow, I think about next week and what I'm going to do. I already want to know. Not worried about the stuff that's going to happen on Wall Street on Monday, Tuesday. If you watch it at all, you lose your mind. So I forget about that. I'm going to have a great time next weekend, and I'm going to make sure that everything I do Monday through Friday guarantees when I get to that time when I spend with my family, I exercise those things that I wanted. These are simple little things. But I hope when you leave here, maybe something in this discussion sparked a little difference in the way that you approach what you do when you walk out of here. Now, I promised I wouldn't keep you here for the whole 4 hours, because Father said you got 4 hours, and I thought that was a lot, you know. And I just want to say, this is a beautiful creation. Except when I called Father, I said, I look a little fat down there. I don't know where you get that picture. And he said, don't worry, Lenny, I'll take care of it. So this is the one he put all over the campus. This is Bourbon Street. Hookers, prostitutes, drunks, 24/7, vomit on the street. This is Bourbon Street. I said, that's an improvement. I'm still fat down here. And now there's stripper poles in these things. You can handle it. Yeah, I guess I did. I go on the campus and say, this guy's going to do his talk on Bourbon Street. All the great places you can go to get in trouble. So I just want to say, he also cut Mary out of the picture with her dog for Bourbon Street. But that's okay. He's got a sense of humor. It was about Joseph anyway, so we got that part of it covered.
Thanks once again to Lenny Alsfeld, PC class of 1974, for that presentation and for all he does to support his alma mater. Just a reminder that you can find the Providence College podcast at all the usual places, and they're available on the college's YouTube channel. Feedback is welcome at podcast@providence.edu. Thanks to our producer, Chris Judge. I'm Joe Carr. Until next time.